review today, actually, with the 2MK team in this Dead or Alive 6 SixyTimes Thursday lobby. We are doing the usual US East Coast loser stays on sort of thing that we always tend to do. And you are absolutely welcome to join us. You'll need to change your search criteria to loser stays on for that, but you should be able to find the 2MK lobby. That said, we're doing things a bit differently today in that we have changed the health back to normal. We're running 5 rounds at the moment, and overall we are having the team effectively discuss, or at least several of the team members discuss, what we've learned from the last year, how we've come, maybe a little bit of where we're going, and just seeing what we can see and notice, point out, or discuss with each other about the whole, well, I can do that now, sort of thing. So that is what you are in for today. It is not going to be one of our silent streams this time around. There is going to be a bunch of chatter. We're not so much giving advice as looking at what we've learned and, well, how we're doing now. Unfortunately, on my side, I did not join this match in time to see it start, so I will be watching on stream along with the rest of you, and hopefully get in for the next one.
One of the best things that I've been able to do this year as Honoka is specifically being able to defend for longer periods and use more of my footsies other than this thing. Because at the start of the year, pretty much my entire neutral flow was just that punch. And now, I can do this. Or that. So even though I still have bursty options, I can get a whole lot done just by relaxing, just using some of these bigger ones from time to time. and having an easier time with low crushes like that as well.
You won't tell anyone.
I've also chilled out a lot on the offense such that I often don't get hit by wake-up kicks anymore just by the virtue of not being there. So he did hit me with one by the end. Brad is complicated. But fun.
On that note, one of our largest changes, I guess, this year is that I don't think last year that Cosmical Space Wolf was actually playing Brad Wong. I think that is more or less entirely new this year.
Yep.
And so is basically everything that goes with it. So I can certainly talk about improvements there, but they're more so going to be over the course of the part of the year that Space Wolf has actually been playing that character than anything else specifically. This has, of course, also given us new things to train on and improve on, as you would expect with any new character or style, really, that you start to encounter on a regular basis. Since we mainly play with each other, the characters and styles that we have are the ones we have the most experience with. And so getting Brad Wong into the mix has meant that, well, for the rest of us, we have been practicing a lot on, like, defending from lows, honestly. Because most of the time, a lot of our other characters that we tend to face, certainly that I tend to face, while we all do use lows, it's not remotely something that is as large a part of the game as it is when we are facing Space Wolf's Brad Wong.
In particular, for a lot of our characters, there just isn't that much of a flow from lows. Honoka has 2 of them, and neither of them leads into much. And Helena has a couple, but they have a fairly consistent hold flow to them. Meanwhile, Brad just kicks low in lots and lots of situations, and gets a bunch of damage out of it. Like that.
That has also led into some of my personal improvements, which I'm not actually the one on the controller today, Kanzuki Dynasty, but still it's the year in review, and I can review a little bit. Has led into Space Wolf's Brad Wong has, among other things, forced me to pay attention to holds a little more. I had for a long time tried to get the basics of this game together without using holds very much most of the time, and trying to handle things through spacing and with punishing and such matters, which obviously in DOA, a game which is designed with holds as one of the Jonkin steps, is kind of a meaningful improvement. But Space Wolf has certainly given me a lot of practice in that, as I've started to pick it up over the course of this year.
It's given us a lot of practice. I, for one, never held a low in my life before holding Brad Wong's lows.
I can't say that I'd never held a low before Brad Wong, but I certainly hold a lot more of them today.
It wasn't really apparent when I was fighting earlier, because I was trying to mostly solve the problem in a different way, but it's there. And Space Wolf wasn't using as many towards me, probably because I would hold them.
And also, the way that Space Wolf approaches with Brad Wong and tends to have a little bit of their zoning style that's just natural there for that player. It has also given me, I guess, some more skill in a sort of combination of patience and, well, spacing for whip punishing and such, simply because of the way Space Wolf plays Bradwong. It tends to be something that's, well, it's relevant to I play, particularly for me as a Helena. I found that Space Wolf gives me relatively good, I wouldn't say test cases, but you may know what I mean. Just, ways to learn it given their particular style. Since with the bit of zoning, Space Wolf will wait more often and such things. Gives me a little more of a bursty experience. As far as how Space Wolf has improved directly, personally, over the last... Well, I'm going to say recently, because I can't really say over the year if I'm thinking about just things related to Bradwong. I know they started out with really kind of less variation, obviously just starting a new character and such. But recently I feel like Space Wolf has been doing a bit more branching out in terms of options and basically getting to the point where they can, I guess, mix me up a little more.
It used to be that the approaches on Elliot were relatively linear, and it felt sort of constrained in a way, and now we have, not just because of the way the character has multiple different ways of approaching, but also just a little more relaxing into thinking about them more.
Yeah. And I know just from talking to Space Wolf outside the game and such, Bradwong is really great for them, apparently, so... There you go.
Good evening, everyone. Just fine here.
Hello.
As for one of my own, not necessarily improvements, but changes to the way I approach the game, at least, has been getting a lot more use out of thinking about the different ways that stages interact with my options for matchups I'm familiar with. This is probably the stage I am most familiar with in terms of my options. Mostly because I love the stage a lot for fairly obvious reasons if you know me well enough. But the stage is also great because it presents so many different situation types when it comes to it.
One big thing that I've started to notice for 100S, or just fine, is that she's been putting in a lot more work into various hold-like things. I know Hitomi is a little unique on that, and there's quite a bit to to look at here, but the big one that I've noticed is just using Break Hold more often and not being as worried about spending meter to get out of situations.
Blurry Moon, our analyst, generally does not necessarily join us for the actual fighting on stream part of this all that often, although she does pick up the controller from time to time, and obviously not everything is a matter of what we see on stream. She has been working on her ability to get her spacings right and such to make people miss more. Taking advantage of Sumi's deceptive movement and her own skill with spacing and prediction.
For a lot of this, Kasumi's movement is a really important part of it. You can see her hop over the opponent and just whatever move was trying to get at Kasumi, it's just not there. In this case, a super happened, but without that, there wasn't really much of a shot there.
Ninja characters in games often tend to have a lot of deceptive buttons, things that will high profile, low profile, or just make your opponent mess up or think you're doing one thing when you might not be. So it's obviously a useful and important ability for people who like to play that sort of character.
And in terms of my own play, when I do get to end up fighting Blurry Moon, there's a lot of more opportunities, I feel like, in terms of getting to practice my offense. And honestly, some of my defense too, given how aggressive she can be sometimes. As a result of her own playstyle becoming a lot more obvious to me in terms of my own understanding of the game. Kasumi has a lot of technical pieces to her when it comes to the matchup, and while our bot has given me a better idea of how to approach the problem of Kasumi, Blurry Moon herself can make that a lot more well, I get read a lot. That's probably the shortest way to say it.
Indeed. That is the benefit of training with friends, when you can get your things that you need to work on into complementary sort of alignment. Now we have Dago.
So the primary thing that Amara, or Grand Serpent as the name is on stream, has been about both understanding that holds are active for a very long time and therefore can be used with a little less precision than you might expect, and that Diego has some moves that act like armor, just in the sense that their properties and their hitboxes are very strong. That charge there in particular is very good both for spacing and as a sort of armor attack. And you can see it used there. Just Fine has been defending against it fairly well, but that is its primary purpose, is just to go and do that charge. Now, Amara plays much less often than others here, so she's been using both general analysis from Brillian and some bot work to keep up with the rest and play when she's able to.
Yeah, that armor thing tends to tie back to her Street Fighter. She plays Abigail there, who is obviously all about the armor. So getting that understanding down and learning how to use it has obviously been a bit helpful for her in this game as well, since it lets her link up her skill sets and obviously continue to do the sorts of things she likes to do.
From Despine's side as well, we've seen a bit more learning about the different moves that Hitomi has, especially the ones that Fatal Stun. You've seen a lot of Fatal Stuns in this match. Those are specifically moves that she's been starting to use in the last 2 or 3 months. Especially the hop kick thing. Axe kick? I think it's called an axe kick.
Yeah, at the beginning of the year, I wasn't really using Fatal Stun moves, or really the mechanic in general. So part of that was mostly because I was trying to focus on the normals, but the more I ended up playing with other people and got into more intensive neutral situations, it became clear that the way they intended to solve some of Hitomi's overall puzzle relative to being in footsies with people was basically to stop doing footsies entirely, because the Fatal Stun move for Hitomi just closes so much space. It gives her the extra range in a certain way that I was definitely missing. On top of that, the break hold has also been quite a large difference in my strategy. At the beginning of playing this game in general, I ended up doing a lot of understanding how to hold moves in general, which carried over from DOA last round, but even there I did not quite master it. The break hold definitely adds a new layer to my overall defense and made a bunch of different situations a lot less stressful, which allowed me to focus on a bunch of other things. The other thing that I ended up learning that Amara herself had worked on around the middle of the year was sidestepping. You can sidestep into an attack through using the sidestep window and entering in an attack button if you have bar, which for characters who don't have as good of tracking moves or have binary situations in neutral where the tracking is not as definitive, such as like Hanoka or Hitomi, the sidestep into attack ended up opening up a lot of options for me.
And it's especially good in the sense that it's really fast. So even if you had a move that you normally sidestep anyway, by using the specific sidestep attack, you guarantee that you're going to get a hit and a knockdown and a fairly decent chunk of damage to it as well.
I just appreciate sidesteps in general. I don't necessarily use my sidestep attack as often as, for instance, Just Fine and Omni Rabbit are talking about, but I do use it, of course. But just adding sidesteps in general to my game, which was another one of the things that came together this year for, well, most of us really, which is why it's on this stream, has been so glorious. Being able to dodge certain sorts of things, make myself a little more difficult to target in particular ways, has obviously opened up a glorious set of opportunities for me to whiff punish things and otherwise just get to do my thing more so without having to worry quite as much in certain situations, even though it is certainly work, which has been really nice overall.
And this comes up especially in the context of Mila specifically, which is somebody that DeWolf here for us has switched to long enough ago that I guess that's most of the year. But because Mila
I would say it was still this year though.
Yeah. Because Mila has relatively poor tracking on a lot of her main attack vectors, sidestepping is very important against her. And he in turn has been learning to play around it and do some sidesteps of his own.
Yeah, sidestep approach and sidestep retreat are also super helpful for obvious reasons.
There's the kick.
In terms of... Yep.
But part of the reason why sidestepping in games like this was such a big deal is because a lot of the, like, as we have discussed in previous streams, a lot of the frame data is sort of dependent on how the question of one deals with pressure works. And sidestep, as a defensive option, as well as an offensive one, has a lot to do with why the frame data works and makes the offense of the game dealable on both sides.
Because a lot of the moves that are really fast also don't track. Like the basic 5P will whiff not just on duck, but also on sidestep for most characters. So sidestepping to avoid a really fast move is viable. And is important too.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm going to have to learn going into next year, actually, is to step up my game in terms of learning to sidestep at closer ranges where the precise timing of it is more of a thing in that sort of way, and I can use it to get out of that sort of chains or pressure type situation, presumably similar to holds, partly by predicting my opponent and having an idea of the sorts of attacks they're going for, but obviously also learning how far I can push that sort of thing. So it's certainly something I'm not good at yet, but I'm working on it. Sidesteps are glorious, after all.
And while they aren't super effective against Honoka in the same way that they are against Mila, this kick gets sidestep, and this one gets sidestep too. So two of my biggest neutral tools just sort of get messed up by sidestepping. Oh jeez. That one too, right? A lot of Honoka's sort of really strong offense, I guess combo starters I should say, are don't track at all. The main one that does is this one. And there's another show of the 5P combo often can just be sidestep in the middle.
Rabbit, did you tend to use that offensive hold thing all that much before this year? Because honestly, it's terribly troublesome.
I never even knew it existed, and it is not that troublesome against Diego in the sense that the spot where his highs come are not generally the ones where I want to do that little hop thing. But against Helena and against Ayane in a bunch of ways, it's pretty terrifying. I didn't even know offensive holds existed at the start.
Yes, it is.
And here I am, hopping.
As a Helena who tries to fight you, that move is horrifying. Although I'm getting a little better with it, it's still definitely the right option for moments where you can get me to think a little too hard about something else, or just not quite have enough focus left to keep myself out of the position, or expect it, or, you know, all the usual fighting game things.
The other thing from Amara is that, as far as I know, she's also been working on getting more throws in, and Diego does a lot of damage off of throws. So when it hits, oh, does it hit? Like that. I also got a lot more confirms this year, mostly from realizing that I can end a lot of strings into the throw juggle. And that is pretty important because you can't hold that. You just get thrown. So it's very useful to end a combo with that, even if you don't get nearly as much damage as you would continuing it otherwise. You don't get held, and that's pretty great.
Honestly, I feel like on the matter of throws, at least I personally have stopped throwing as much later on in this year relative to at least how much I managed to land throws on people early in the year. Not that I've been less successful, I've just been using the option less often. I might try and put some of that back next year, but it's more likely that it's just going to either happen or not as a result of the other things I do.
Yeah. In particular, it's likely to happen as a punish in certain challenging situations more than anything.
That's actually one of the places where I have found myself using it a little less, and I probably should not. But we'll see.
They're very fast, so it's a pretty reasonable option against things like Ayane's drill kick.
I think it might be just my personal need to press buttons.
That's fair. And now for making Brad Wong miss. This match is very strongly about Space Wolf working on varied offense against Rillian, because she will just stop if she feels that the opponent is waiting on her too much, and that's what she's been focused on. This happened before Brad Wong as well. It was especially striking on Elliot, where it would just result in Elliot sitting at the edge of the screen and not really doing a whole lot. With Brad, there's a bit more confidence in the mobility, but the same sort of thing happens here too.
Yeah, it's basically forcing Space Wolf to use varied offense, not necessarily as opposed to non-varied offense, but more so there's less opportunities to just sit around or make your opponent come to you. I'm impatient, I haven't trained this yet. I'm coming to Brad Wong, although I've learned somewhat ways to do this. But
Your
Lord Moon
accuracy
has
against
specifically
him.
trained this, so or rather it's one of her main focuses lately, so Space Wolf now has to obviously learn to keep going in to have offense, have it be variable enough that it's not just going to be held or counter hit every single time, since the damage and opportunities aren't necessarily coming the other way if you slow down a lot.
Oh, I'm surprised that handstand doesn't get thrown. That's weird. And Brad does have an easier time trying to figure out varied approaches just because of the very strange hitboxes that he often has. But it's still a lot to work on, as you can see here, making Brad miss quite a bit and getting him out of a lot of different things that he does.
Yes, I think that's been probably the largest challenge for me, because just the mere fact that Brad can just lay on the ground and not really care about anything, and be able to attack you from that position, is kind of a difficult puzzle for a more straightforward character like Hitomi to solve specifically.
I think we've all had to work on our accuracy as a result, and I know that Rune Siren especially has done a big shift in terms of accuracy and in terms of moves that she uses in order to face Brad Wong. And for me, I was doing it in the first match on stream today, which was using weird moves that I don't tend to use very often, like the drop kick, are super effective against him and mostly not useful in other situations.
Yes, for me some of that is getting used to Space Wolf's personal patterns and tendencies, but it has certainly overall required that I get my spacing and sort of accuracy relative to my opponent's movements up a bit.
From Brilliant's side of things, the skill of, I wouldn't really even call it patience, more so just understanding when an opponent is basically just wanting to win more than trying to actually solve your own offense or defense, can be quite challenging for extremely technical characters who have a lot of options to solve a bunch of different situations. But because there's so many of them, you have to have a good understanding of the options, have really good reaction times, So it can put on a lot of danger in the scrambles for such characters, and honestly, it can be personally frustrating.
A big one is also just having the trust in the option and in the read of the opponent's flow. Especially when you've got a really weird one where if you hit Brad Wong a little bit too early or a little bit too late, you whiff even though normally you would be fine.
But
Yeah,
being able to...
Learning to balance that is definitely an important thing for, well, everyone really, although it can be more so if you're playing someone more technical. Because at the end of the day, whoever has the life lead at the end is going to win. So, you can't not go in, but you can't go in too hard and trip yourself up beyond. It becomes an interesting balancing act, and something that you can actually end up training very hard for, depending on your style and the types of opponents you tend to face. Now we have the contrast of Brad Wong, who will lay down or handstand or dodge and be strange all over the battlefield, versus Satomi, who's just going to punch you straight in the chest. And this contrast, I guess I'll call it, is reminded me personally of taking those strong linear attacks and getting the timing right for my defenses, obviously which defense to use and such, which has been a theme of my practice at certain points, particularly when Just Fine is in, and obviously similar opportunities with other characters. I guess it's a work in progress, I would say, in terms of managing to remain calm enough and have the right kind of personal balance, I guess slightly similar to what we were just talking about, to manage to defend and expect those sorts of things. It's certainly something that's going to be a challenge for me going forward, because it means that you need to, at least for some of it, wait and pause and predict how and when your opponent is going to move in ways that, well, it can just be hard to pause in a fighting game for a particular period that's not based on your own personal rhythm. So I have gotten a little more used to keeping my own rhythm and sense of timing and balance flexible, but it's certainly something that's going to continue on into next year, along with, obviously, my sidestepping and holding work. Since if you get the timing for any of those wrong, it can really not help. But you still gotta do it if you want to get anywhere meaningful.
There we go. A bit of an adjustment on my end, but seems to have paid off quite a bit. But yeah, I think one of the more important things that I've adapted to is in fact the break hold I was referring to earlier. This is mostly because I do have a really strong idea of how I want my neutral to go. This is partially due to all of the different characters I play in other fighting games like Mika, Baiken to a lesser extent. Honestly, even Dictator, although he has a few things that make it, you know, a little easier. Just due to all of his overwhelming plus buttons. But the principles are still the same in terms of how I approach neutral. In this game, Hitomi is really comfortable to play. But when a character has the ability to thwart or just flatly ignore neutral, similar to Brad Long, honestly, although there's definitely other better examples that are not coming to the top of my head at the moment. But being able to just break the hold and, you know, get out of a more complex situation, narrowing it down to the pieces that make a little more sense. Because breakhold is basically an extremely learnable situation. And I'm all about learnable situations. So, obviously, the buttons you are able to press or the options you want to pick for post-break hold tend to vary depending on the character you're facing. But I have personally done a lot of working out what exactly those should be, and it has resulted in me being able to get off a lot more damage, but more importantly, be able to work on my corner guard more, because an obvious situation to use breakhold in is when neutral is no longer a thing, because you're back against the wall for whatever reason, and the opponent has a bunch of good pressure options or whatever. Being able to just break the hold and go to the other side for basically free. Obviously it costs you meter, but it doesn't cost you too much in terms of advantage in the offensive rhythm. But learning when to use it is kind of its own set of Jonkin. Not only does it get rid of the ability to use your super if you have full meter like these two do now, but it can also leave you fairly vulnerable if the opponent just chooses nothing as their button, quote-unquote. And there's definitely a lot of player types that like doing that more often, or feel like they've adapted to knowing when you're going to use breakhold.
And even if they do a particularly strong application of breakhold that is very notable in this stage specifically, is that in a lot of points of the stage, you can get thrown into the dudes in the background for a combo extender. But regardless of which move was used for that, the vast majority of the time you can break hold the extender, and that then adds an extra layer of defense even for this pseudo knockdown state. It's unlikely to come up since they're not fighting in the spaces that lead to being knocked into the dudes, but it is a very useful thing to remember.
But yes, back to the player who is good at neutral part of it. Like, if you're good at neutral, you're usually also really good at building meter, which is something I've been working on utilizing to a better extent this year in all the fighting games I play. It mostly comes up with Armika, but a lot of the same principles to play Armika and use her meter effectively come up a lot in Hitomi as well. So I've benefited from both games in that sense. And honestly, it makes the game a lot more fun when you can just be like, yeah, you're doing all these fancy moves. Well, here, I have meter, and not afraid of using. Now back to our leather jacket, fabulous hairdo mechanic. Well, I don't think Diego's a mechanic, but I think of him so much as similar to Abigail that, you know, I could really see it.
So we now have a repeat match on the stream. And I'm already getting thrown pretty hard. That's his damage. Look at that. More than half of my health is gone. All he did was throw 2 times. Very strong. Another thing that just came up now is that the other option to deal with sidesteps is to throw them in that exact way. If your character doesn't have great tracking, well, you can throw the sidestep, and it does quite a bit of damage to do so.
Another reason why I like this stage. Randomly converts this beautiful explosive rectangle into a small square money pit of doom.
And that's quite good, because it helps Diego, who has a lot of strong close range options, just be able to use them a lot more, just by virtue of me being compressed into the wall. And having more reach is important because outside of kicks, Diego doesn't have great range in the same way that, say, Honoka does just by doing that. And his kicks are particularly non-committal, which allows him to get... That is basically the strength of those kicks. Even if he doesn't have it via buttons, via the punches as much, the movement both from the pseudo-armor move that, which is really good, even on block I get quite a bit of knockback from that, and the use of sidestep means that Diego can make up for a lot of these things and hit you pretty hard. Diego has a bunch of these guard crush moves, and after all of them, there's not really a whole lot you can do. And now he's in your face.
Yep. Diego certainly is explosive in that way when it comes to movement and offense. And since he does have a lot of knockback on his stuff, even on block, he can't really be punished as easily versus certain characters due to the range. Because as we...
Keep going.
As we were discussing earlier about the frame data, a lot of it is specifically negative in that you're not going to get a lot of plus quote-unquote situations, but this is mainly because of things like calculating the exact range most moves of a certain speed can actually go. So things like the knockback in Diego's case may not be as minus as one would expect.
It was a pretty interesting experience because I don't usually fight Diego on this stage, and even without the walls, it's very favorable to him. It's very easy to compress you into a narrow space just by the virtue of that stage. You have to intentionally shift to the long way in order to actually get any space, and Diego can control that pretty easily. That's pretty cool.
Now here's a match I don't think we've seen on stream all year. So this should be interesting. I've seen them fight offline, but it's honestly really difficult to describe, so I'm not going to try. I can describe it as intense, though. Both of them are fairly aggressive players and have a really solidly defined way of thinking about how they want to approach offense. And DOA as a game in general, the offense can be really subtle and multifaceted. Leading to, honestly, a lot of situations that are so difficult to explain why exactly they work, or why the decision was the correct one. If you ever get a chance to see high-level DOA, I highly recommend it. Especially if Excalibur is on, because that man is really insane. It's fascinating to watch.
He did a bunch of launch tournaments for this game, and I was in one of them, and oh boy, that man has movement.
Well, if anybody gets to claim they're an OG Excalibur.
Now here we have the natural match of one who doesn't usually get
like
hit,
that.
and the person, Diego, who, if he does hit, he hits quite hard.
I cannot tell you why half of the things happened, and I know both of these characters really well at this point. I've fought them a lot, I've looked at their movesets, I've been in training mode with them constantly throughout the year, and like, why did any of that happen? I don't know. But it looked super cool, so, you know, gotta love it.
Well, fast and movement is important for a good ninja character. I don't know how soon we will see Ayane on the stream, but it's a similar principle in a different way over there as well. I don't think I've seen that ice skating move before.
I don't think I've seen Brilliant herself use that against any other character. And not even against other Diegos she's fought. Then again, she's also played with Nico more this year, so maybe she's just suddenly learned to groove with it. And since she is pretty familiar with Amara's fighting style and has fought her offline a few times, maybe just found that particular puzzle piece to be particularly useful.
That's definitely an interesting way to get out throws. It's just Kasumi has so many high-flying moves that you can just use one of these up kicks to get out of throw range.
But you can see some of the things we were talking about before about Amara's Diego from this year in this fight as she's adapted a bit more to the high octane speed of Brilliant Unfettered. Like, a lot of the movement and choices for using some of her kicks, her being Amara in this case, or some of Diego's really good tracking moves were definitely coming into play throughout those matches. It was a lot closer than the win tally would lead you to believe.
Now we've got Jomi and Diego, and I think we haven't seen this in a while, right? You haven't gotten to play Amara in quite a bit.
Well, other than earlier tonight, yeah.
So, getting a lot more of this kind of practice is pretty good.
Also, I've made it a point today to select stages I just loathe playing on. like forever or whatever that stage I was fighting Brad Wong on with the tanks. It's just so open. I think I have the most problems with stages that are really open, mostly because I don't know what to do with all the space. And it lets my opponent like run away from me forever or get out of my range of control a lot easier. I'm not really the sort of person who likes playing really aggressive Hitomi. She does have a lot of good pressure, but even though I don't necessarily want to be near the wall all the time, the threat of the wall being there and putting them into that position is something that I've been trying to get used to dealing with and dealing without. As I go into next year, it's probably something I'm gonna end up understanding a little more intensively.
Well, on the note of large open spaces and Hitomi threatening people, Diego gets to have sort of an example of the sort of thing that I was talking about before with the whole learning how to manage the reactive sidesteps against her in neutral. At longer ranges, it's really important for him against Hitomi, and it's obviously something that Amara has to work on and get down, since it gives you the opportunity to get around a lot of her stuff at longer ranges where you might not have quicker moves or such to deal with it as easily, since Hitomi is kind of linear at her further out ranges. So if you can learn to reactively sidestep, or sidestep when you're expecting her to come at you or such, you get obviously the opportunities for the punishes, like I was discussing before, but it can make it harder for her to approach and give you back some of the control of space that Just Fine was just talking about. Obviously, especially like if you're in that, not quite on a wall, but sort of threat of a wall range, having that option is going to be useful just in terms of being able to, well, not have the threat of wall turned into wall, obviously. As well, since the sidestep is a bit of a rotation on the stage, giving you a bit of opportunity to, well, clear out that threat and gain back some of the control.
Huh. I just noticed that Hitomi's... that my 5H plus K is also stolen from Hitomi. Neat. Honoka stole a lot of this woman's moves.
I feel like every other week you're saying, oh, huh, that's who Honoka stole this move from.
It's true. I don't know where all my moves come from. Side effect of playing Honoka is you get an intuitive understanding of a lot of moves in this game because you use those moves.
I suppose that would help a little.
I'd rather think of it more so as Honoka's move animations are a result of skilled, efficient programming and game design.
Sure. She does have her own actual individual unique moves. They're just uncommon.
And every day you find out one that you thought wasn't.
The ones with the glowing fist usually aren't.
Aha.
All I'm saying is we had to get the budget for all of these fancy environmental effects somehow.
Yes. Anyway, back to Brad Wall. And this time, I'm gonna try to hold lows more. Dropped it, but I tried it.
Yes, one of the things that Space Wolf has been improving on in the last, I would say, month and a half to 2 months has been making the, let's say, obvious low holds a little less reliable. Some more of that varied offense that we were talking about back with the match with Kasumi. And so it's been forcing the rest of us to learn not just to hold low, when to expect to hold low, catch it in Space Wolf's flow and style, but basically leveling up from there. It's really been a very good sort of tutorial introduction, slow level up sort of thing. You know how video games tend to introduce you to a concept and then push a little harder on it, a little harder on it. Well, obviously in fighting games that depends on the opponents that you're facing, but in our case, for at least low holds and that sort of thing, Space Wolf's Brad Wong has been basically an excellent introduction. Going from, well, this is definitely a thing that you need, so we all have to, like, learn it and get into the habit, to integrating it with other things and becoming more variable, both in timing and options and such things. So we're just sort of slowly ratcheting up the levels and requirements as we go along.
And while low holds are not as applicable against other characters, just because they don't use them that much, one of the other things that has been is learning more evasive moves like this, which is extremely useful for a lot of situations, and I picked it up just from trying to dodge Brad Wong's stuff. I don't know how common those moves are, but at least on non-ninja characters, but for me it's been pretty enlightening to try and use that sort of thing. Oh, neat. The main remaining issue for me is when that bull charge happens. I'm pretty sure that's a mid, but I'm never in the right space to hold it. I've tried, and I've still got a long way to go for it. Oh, I got it! Neat. That's the first time I've been ready for that.
Okay, so what was the button you did at the end there?
That was just regular mid-hold, because that's a mid-punch. I believe it
see.
just plays a different animation for aerial moves that don't have, like, a punch that you can grab. I've noticed that
I
the
see.
hold animation changes if there isn't, like, a limb that is immediately in the space where you were going to grab.
Okay, that makes
Yep.
sense. I gotta say that animation was great, so I had to check.
There's a lot of different hold animations than just, you know, 4. Mostly due to, as you were pointing out, the different, like, states that can happen and how they occur relative to whatever button the opponent was pressing. So you gotta learn more of the knockdown situations as a result of this too. Because what move you end up holding changes whether or not you can do certain things or are at certain spacings for the opponent to wake up. definitely something to take a closer look at next year.
For me, a big thing, other than obviously that bull approach and other really fast charging moves that I'm not particularly good at here and only sort of good at in other games, I want to focus on being able to go in a little more, because generally what happens when I start my own offense and pressure on knockdowns is I get red a lot and die. And striking a better balance between that and sort of zoning it full screen is something I really want to be able to deal with, just to make myself a little less, I don't want to say predictable, but varied. A little more varied. This stage is a little more cramped than the ones they've been fighting on previously, so it's a little harder to force Brad Wong to go in when it's so easy to end up in front of him.
On the other hand, we do get to see some of that Kasumi mobility.
Yeah, that flip is really cool. And then you get all sorts of fun things like that. That is one main way that I found, at least, to deal with Brad Wong, is to just, if you are sufficiently mobile or you have sufficiently quick strikes, you can, if you understand the stance that Brad is in, make a pretty solid hit on him. That understanding has taken a while to come to bear. But also, when you have a technical movement-based character like Kasumi, your accuracy also becomes a little difficult, just in the sense of, because Brad's hurt boxes can be difficult to understand at times, even if you know what he's gonna do, you might not have a full understanding of where he's gonna be.
And there we see that break, hold, corner, escape, person on the wall, escape sort of setup going on again.
And that's very useful when your game plan has trouble with that. I've noticed that Root Siren has started to do that a little more, because Helena, when trapped in the corner, has a pretty bad time. You know, even accounting for most characters, she really doesn't want to be in that compressed space.
Yeah, I really just don't feel like dealing with that most of the time. I'll hail the break hold.
And in the Brad Wong matchup specifically, one thing that I've definitely noticed is that a lot of supers tend to hit mid-ish or higher than you would expect, in the sense that Brad can just lie under a lot of them. So you're gonna miss your super against Brad a lot of the time. And if you end up sitting on all that meter, consider using it defensively. I've personally stopped using super against them unless I know I'm confirming into it, because I'm probably gonna live. I've used it a couple times explicitly to hit, but those were very calculated moments. You can't just throw it out there because you will end up missing with most character supers.
Alright, time to see if I can repeat what I did last time.
Speaking of hold animations, Brad Wong has also led us to finally see a lot of low hold animations. I like Helena's a lot. I like Honoka's quite a bit. It's a good time. More confidence in movement across the board, I think, has been pretty nice to see.
You know, oddly, oh no, now I remember. I was just gonna say that I don't actually remember what Helena's low hold looks like, because I cross it with Karin's low parry. No, I remember now, it's the just flip you up thing.
Down the hatch.
I was not expecting that to work.
Timing the Axic is often difficult in the sense that, well, speaking as someone who stole that move, you often miss people getting up in their wake up invincibility, so you gotta be careful with your timing. Oh, that low punch was interesting. That is one thing that I've gotten a lot of mileage of, is experimenting with low punches against Brad specifically, but also in general as an evasive maneuver. Trying different lows often grants you more accuracy against him, not just when he's lying down, just in general. It's fairly interesting. It's spaceful on their part, having using more of the mids and relying less on the triple low kick here.
particular round was a perfect demonstration of the whole sidesteps and break holds thing. We're dealing with Tomy, getting in the corner, all that fun stuff. Rather, more so, spaces where that's all needed.
That is the first time I've seen a trade in this game. You see a lot fewer trades in DOA than in most fighting games, I would think. But that might just be the nature of 3D. I'm not that familiar with Tekken.
It happens with Hitomi a lot because she has the speed and the depth of the hurt box, but obviously when you have people as wonky as Brad Wong versus someone with as straightforwardly generous hitboxes like Hitomi and certain moves, you get a lot of weird situations.
One of the rare situations where Brad Wong gets hit by a mid-super.
Want to do it again?
That is very rare. I haven't changed costume all night. I don't remember if I have the Christmas one. I should get festive at some point.
All right.
What I need is strength, not some stupidity.
Amara definitely haven't learned to use throws as a hold punish in very effective ways. Because Diego already has baseline high throw damage, and once you make it I believe the term is high counter throw, that is very dangerous.
Man, I want to fight y'all. Talking about all this different stuff and just watching basically the whole team assembled is making me definitely want to join in and get in some of these fights myself. Unfortunately, having basically the whole team assembled means that we start to reach a limit on the number of available PlayStations, and sadly the accounts don't necessarily all have all of the characters, so there is no Helena for me tonight. And so I feel like playing Sumi or Nico wouldn't go quite as well.
One advantage, therefore, that Diego has, I guess me specifically, is I like to hold a lot, even just to try and learn and suss out opponent patterns, because I often have a sense of when something is coming and then miss the hold window. Mara, however, is just guessing my whole attempt and getting connect for it. I did not know he could do that. That is so cool. Also, while I earlier said that this hop doesn't have a whole lot of use against Diego, apparently it counterholds his super, so that's pretty cool. Did that by accident.
Your offensive hold, do you think?
Yeah.
Sweet. On the other hand, it's good to be excited about a game, so I guess I will fight you all next week instead. And honestly, really, this sort of thing's kind of a good idea. If y'all watching at home or whatnot, you should try going through, obviously, maybe yearly, maybe every few months or whatever, and just look at, like, what have you gotten better at? What's going well? How have you improved? It's a good way to hype yourself up, honestly. Keep your enthusiasm going on. As well as hyping you up for, oh man, this part is so good now, I bet I can pull this off next. Or just whatever you're training next, just the next thing you want to add to your game. Because you obviously just end up looking at all of the things that have paid off. And that's always a good feeling.
Yeah, it's really stress in the fighting game community in general to rewatch your matches or whatever. And this is usually set in the context of looking for ways you can improve, looking at all the mistakes that you've made, and all that sort of stuff. But it can be kind of a drag if you're always looking at everything wrong with your game. So looking at everything right with your game occasionally can keep you from getting burned out for sure.
Another thing is specifically the long time window, because looking at your matches from last week or 2 weeks ago, that can get frustrating sometimes. But looking at matches from the beginning of the year can really illuminate both all the things that you've been doing and how that's come out, and also possibly give you new ideas just from, hey, I used to play different. Maybe not all of the changes have been things that I can use now.
Yeah, or maybe, oh, I had to take this out of my game, but I bet now that I learned this other thing, I can put it back. It's really, a lot of the progress and growth that we experience in fighting games is a very incremental thing. There are those big breakthroughs where something clicks and you get this whole new mindset, or you like grinded out this particular combo that you really needed, and it's getting you a ton more damage. But overall, it's little things upon little things upon little things upon little things, and that makes it very smooth. So if you're looking at, if you only look at things like, how am I now? What am I working on? Obviously, you're thinking about the things you still have trouble with. But even if you try and look back, you go, it's not as easy to see because it's all lots of little pieces. But then if you go and take like one of your matches, or like watch an old stream from 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, now you get to see all of that put together. You get to see like all of the little pieces at once that you've trained since then. And if you're just like going along and trying to remember it, it's been so smooth you're not even going to notice or think about it. You might even have trouble thinking about it a lot of the time. But when you go back and watch those older streams, particularly from longer periods ago, the difference can be night and day sometimes. You're like, wow, man, I got way better. And you also get to see the specific things that you used to screw up on or you didn't have. And you get to think about, wow, man, I'm doing so much better now that I have this particular mindset, or now that I trained that reaction, I don't take any damage in this matchup. All these sorts of things. And just having all of that can help you feel really good about the things that you're doing now, too. In ways that... I mean, you could probably pull it off, but it wouldn't be as striking and obvious a difference without just, taking some of that time to compare. So definitely rewatch your matches to figure out what went wrong or what's going on. Honestly, a couple weeks later, once you're, you've forgotten what you were thinking about, so you get a more unbiased picture, that is great for, figuring out what to train and where your holes are, or what went wrong in a particular match or something. But definitely go and look back farther and just take some time to relax and think about what you have learned. And maybe as a result of that, oh man, I still have that problem. I should work on that next. It's a very helpful experience emotionally in terms of sustaining yourself.
From that perspective specifically, I've been starting to realize I think I enjoy bi-weekly events more than weekly events, just because there's a longer time slot in which, just to think about things or improve upon things. And by the time you get to that 2-week window, it's a lot easier to see what you've changed than one Friday to the next, which can sometimes be overwhelming.
Yeah, and unlike a monthly event, it's not like a huge pressure to perform because you only get these sets of matchups once every 30 days. That's 30 days you've been doing fighting and training and all that sort of stuff. But 2 weeks, that's kind of a nice middle ground.
So, if you really want to go and play every week at whatever tournament or whatever, I mean, obviously it splits your training out a little bit, but maybe just enter a different game every other week to give you some of that effect that Omni-Rev just fine have been talking about.
So we haven't really been talking as much about Nico. So Nico doesn't have as much of the mobility that Kasumi has. She definitely has some deceptive stuff, but obviously no big ninja flips across the screen. But she's very sticky. She sticks to you. She has interesting movement, and it's good for practicing sort of against Diego, for practicing more close range stuff, which might be why it really interests her. I definitely haven't seen that lightning charge move before.
She definitely does have a lot of mobility in her built into her moves, though. Nico has a surprising amount of reach, and a lot of her defensive options tend to put her slightly further away than other characters.
I ain't gonna lose.
Well, we are definitely starting to wind down for the night. Not quite end of stream time, but starting to get there.
I think Nico is sort of like Colleen from Street Fighter V in terms of, obviously, if you've played that game, Colleen is the one who, well, basically has holds. Just straight up, outright, as like a main part of her game. Straight down to the high, mid, low, not quite four-way, but you get the idea. And Nico has some of that similar thing, not so much that she has holds, since everyone does, but rather in terms of how she's like required to use them in particular spacings. At the shorter ranges, using her holds is an important part of her game and being able to just manage the flow of how things are going on. And she's also a little bit of a grappler as another side of that.
She has also, similar to Colleen, both the lightning charge being kind of like a vanity step, but more importantly, her low kick that she uses a lot of pressure is similar to the fact that Colleen has moves with sort of strange hitboxes that have a lot of reach and aren't really whiff punishable and often get you low crushed. Bell for me is the stand fierce, but it can be a little different for other people. And at closer range, like I said, she's quite sticky. You have to hold her, because often she can just keep pressing buttons and keep, doing stuff like that into the wall, and if you don't hold in some way, or even break hold, you're probably gonna get trapped. Neat. Good low hold from just fine.
I don't know, her stance from that super... Oh yeah, there's a vanity step. Just like a lot of the ways she moves and her stances kind of show off the parallel as well.
Like Colleen, I definitely feel like I have to vary what I'm doing a lot more in offense. And I have to, play footsies less. Because if you try to, she has really good buttons for dealing with people who want to do that sort of thing. Sidestep is definitely more required, and as we have discussed earlier in the year, in 2D games, neutral jumping is the equivalent, which is something that, while is not necessarily the exact thing you want to do all the time against Colleen, is definitely an important thing to throw in as an option. You definitely want to have your aerial game as a piece of your offensive puzzle against Colleen. Very good breed.
This only verified my hypothesis.
And that last bit is like getting hit by EX Vanity Step in midstream. Sometimes it just happens.
Alright, and it has been a while we've all been at it, and we're starting to wrap up. So, as usual, the next on-stream match that is about to start will be our last on-stream match for the evening. And as the players are all getting tired and the lounge is winding down, it will be the last or near to last match of the lounge, so I would not say that you should necessarily continue to look for us after stream, as is sometimes the case with our other lounges. We have obviously been going through and talking about a lot of stuff that we have been doing over the last year. And obviously that leads to, especially with the consideration of, hey, watch old streams or old matches or whatever, the consideration that all of our content, including our archives of these Battle Lounge streams in this and other games, is available on our YouTube channel. You can find that by visiting our website, 2-mk.org. I believe you can find a link there. Otherwise, 2-mk.org/YouTube will redirect you straight to our channel, where you can find all of our past archives and everything else. Obviously, in many other games, I would say that you can find our bots on that website as well. However, we have more or less paused our work on Dead or Alive 6 bots. We do have some, and you can go check those out, put them in, and train with them to get various basic skills from the game. However, this game, even more so than many of the others that we've encountered, is very limited in terms of what you can do with bots. If you input one in training mode, not only will that bot not save if you change characters, if you close the game, for instance in Street Fighter, it will save per character, every different character you can have its own bot. But in Dead or Alive 6, that is not the case. Even taking a match using the fight request style system, just being queued while in training mode, that style thing, will completely erase your bot and you will be unable to train with it until you put it in again. So, given that it is a little difficult, and we have not put as much effort into continuing to build up our bots for the entire roster as we have with many other games. That said, there are still a few there you can find at 2-mk.org, and just click on Training Bots, click on Dead or Alive, you get the idea. And obviously any of the other games we play, we have bots for Street Fighter 5, for Unist Unclear, for Dragon Ball Fighters, and still a few for this game. But overall, I hope you've enjoyed our yearly review. Maybe take some time to go back and watch streams in the beginning of the year, see how far we've come, or what we've been talking about. It might be something that our team members do over the next few weeks as well, in varying measures. So I'm trying to think about how to go forward as well. In the meantime, you are certainly welcome to join us next week, almost certainly, at the same time, same place, 7 p.m. US Eastern Time. You can check our Twitter, 2_MK_FGC, if you are interested in finding out whether we are having a stream at that time, which is typical, but you know we always will announce about when we are starting the streams for, well, this and other games. That time, of course, is always US Eastern 7 p.m., more or less, sometimes a little later. But you can look for tweets at that time to find out about our Thursday Dead or Alive 6 Lounge, our Tuesday Guilty Gear, sometimes Unclear Lounge, and our Monday Street Fighter V Lounge, as well as any other content such as new bot releases or development that we happen to do. So if you have in fact made it this far, thank you for watching, thank you for stopping by, I hope you have enjoyed your time here, and I hope you have a good evening.
How is my fighting? Want to do it again?